Hello, my name is Marc Sommerfeld. Today we're going to show you how we're going to assemble your new extruded aluminum table and also the fence, and we're going to show you how it operates. After we get that done, we're going to come in here and we're going to show you how to build this nice cabinet to set your table on. So we're going to get started here. Okay, here's your three parts to your router tabletop, and we're going to assemble them now. The middle section, when you do this, you want to put the good side down. And you can see right here where we're going to have a tongue and groove where they're going to lock together, right like that. Okay? And with your hardware package, take your bolt and lock washer right here like this. Bolt comes from the inside, and your nut comes in here. Take your wrench, make sure your ends are flush, and we'll start tightening these down. You got 6 of these to do now. So we'll start tightening all those down. Okay, we got that secured with our 1-inch bolts, lock washers, and nuts. Now, before we flip this top over, we're going to put our fence brackets on. We have 2 types of fence brackets. One has the 4 holes, and the other one has the 3 holes. What you want to do is take a 1/2-inch bolt with the weld nut and come down through the top and put those 4 weld nuts on here. Right like this. You can see how they're going down through the top. Okay, we have one here ready to go. What we're going to do is take those 4 weld nuts and line them up into our grooves on the bottom of our top and slide them right in. Okay, once you have your fence bracket in there, she's flush on the front, we'll take and we'll tighten down those bolts and those weld nuts, right like that. And we want to be all flush on the front there with the front of our table. And we've done the same thing with the back. We've got the fence bracket on the back. Now, the next thing we want to do is put this fence bracket on. And again, you can see we've got the 1/2-inch bolts and the weld nuts. These weld nuts right here are going to slide into this track going this way. So we'll bring it around here, slide it in this way. Okay, we've got that bracket put in, and it's very important to keep this tabletop down so everything's flush on the top. We've got that one done. We've got the back one kind of loosely put in, but before we tighten up this back one back here, the other bracket back here, you want to make sure that you take a series of bolts and slide 2 bolts in each one of these tracks. One here, here. There's 4 tracks underneath here. And what these bolts are going to be used for down the road is to attach your router table top to your cabinet. Okay? So make sure those are inserted in before you put your last bracket system on. Okay, we've got these fence brackets on. The front ones are already on. The next thing we're going to do is what you want to do is make a temporary piece of plywood to cover the opening on us. The dimensions are in our instructions, 27 inches by 31.5. And you can just take a piece of plywood like this and drill the holes in it for your cabinet, for your temporary cabinet, or down the road, if some of these guys like to put this tabletop into their fence system on their table saw. So if we're going to do that, you can make a system like this with see the holes where they're going to go over these bolts, and we come down here so you can bring in your fence system. So what we're going to do today, when you get started here in building your cabinet, just take a piece of plywood, drill the 4 holes, line it up with the bolts right here, and secure it. Then you have something temporary to attach to a workmate or a temporary cabinet that you built to actually build your real top. So we're going to line up these 4 holes and secure this. Okay, we just secured our top, our wooden top, our frame to our router table top. Okay. Next thing we want to do is flip this top over now. Okay, we've got our top flipped over now. The next thing we're going to do is attach our router. And you can see our top is already pre-drilled for the routers that we use. And we like these Triton routers. I'll tell you why. This here model is the 2 1/4 horse, and the advantage of the 2 1/4 horse is once it's in the table, we have a hole pre-drilled here too for a router raiser. From the top of the top, comes right down through the top, and it locks right into here. You can see it right there, and you can raise and lower that router from the top of your table. But you have 2 1/4 horse. We prefer the 3 1/4 horse. It's got more power for our raised panel bits that we use a lot and everything, you know, the 3 1/4. And the only thing is it doesn't have a raiser. But we're going to show you later on how easy it is to raise and lower this router with this little knob right here. But for right now, we're going to attach the 2 1/4. And when you do that, you want to take the base plate off first. Okay? Position your router, again, remembering that the handle adjustment has to be to the front. We're going to take that top and center it right there. Okay, once you've got it positioned, we send along 4 little bolts here and the screwdriver. We're going to screw that top right to that router. You can see we have the router attached. The next thing you want to do now is take this top with the router table and set it in a workmate, or if you build a little temporary cabinet. With this one here, you can see we have the side rails on. You could actually attach this to your side extension on your table saw if you wanted to, and then start building your cabinet, which is what we're going to do next. Okay, you can see we've attached our router tabletop to our real cabinet here, or it'd be your temporary cabinet. And the next thing we want to do is we want to adapt this router so it fits perfectly to this table. And I'll show you the reason we're going to do that. You can see when we put that panel cutter in there now, a large panel cutter, we have no room for our wrench because the opening on the router is too small, as most routers are. So what we're going to do is we're going to eliminate that aluminum housing. To do that, we're going to take a pattern bit, right like this, and that bearing on the pattern bit is going to follow the ring on our table, and we're going to route that aluminum out of there. And it machines very easily, just like a piece of wood. So let's turn this router on and get that job done. Okay, we're ready to take and cut this aluminum out here now. Make sure that your bearing is set to the right height so it's going to conform with that ring. And when you're machining this now, there's one thing you want to remember. If you're machining the aluminum out of a 2 1/4 horse router, you got a little bit more to hog out because the opening on that is a little bit smaller than on the 3 1/4. Okay? And when you do it, turn on the router, turn it on a slow speed to start with, and take your time machining this. And put your glasses on. We'll show you how we're going to do it here. Okay, you can see how we've got all that aluminum housing of that router out of there, so that when our router bit goes in there now, we have plenty of ample room to get that wrench to get the bit in and out. When you do this, also remember you're going to be taking out a little bit of that plastic on that guard. And the thing I like about the Triton router is that guard, because what that guard does, it prevents the chips from falling into your router, and it forces them out the dust chute on our fence. Another nice feature that we like about this Triton router is most routers, the fans on the motors suck the dust in, whereas on this router, it blows the dust up, thus eliminating the chips directly out that chute. Makes it a lot nicer operation. Okay, we got the router ready to go. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to show you how the fence fits on our table. Okay, here's our fence. It's going to sit on our table, and the in-feed fence and the out-feed fence are already attached to your table. What you have to do next is turn that fence upside down. We don't want that fence sliding on the aluminum against aluminum, so what we're going to do is turn it upside down, and you get 2 strips of Teflon tape, What you're going to do is line up the narrow one right here. We'll take a scissors and cut that. And we'll adhere one right here, the other one here, and this long piece is going to be attached right along here. Okay, we've got all that Teflon tape on now, so now when our fence comes into here, we're not sliding aluminum on aluminum. We're not going to scratch our top. Now, next thing we want to do is we want to put our pivot pin right here into our router table fence. And right here is where it goes. There's a threaded hole in the bottom of your table right here. And what we're going to do is put the jam nut onto that pivot pin first and screw that pivot pin in. And you only want it coming out just enough so that that pin's going to show, and that's it. You get the base of the bolt coming out, stop. Take that jam nut, take a wrench on that, snug it down nice and tight. Now, your pivot pin, you can either use your pivot pin, bring it up, and not use it. But right there, she snaps into place. Okay. 90% of the time, you'll find out when we're using our table, we're going to use the pivot pin. And there's a hole right in your top right there. And you can see when we adjust our fence, we can just adjust it by pivoting it. And you can also see now what I did with this fence bracket here. I lowered it. Since we're not using it, we lowered it for two reasons. One reason is now we can get our dust coming out of here like this. The other reason is if you want to take and put a miter gauge into here, you can slide your miter gauge right into here and use your miter gauge. Okay. Now, the next thing we want to do is we can pivot that fence where we want, but now we have to lock down the other side. To do that, this bolt is going to slide in right here. Our fence is going to come up over there, and I'll show you how we're going to lock that down. Before we slide that bolt over there and attach this down, what we want to do is take your dust port. And you can see our dust port is segmented different diameters for different hoses. Most of you will probably be using that big hose, so you're going to probably cut this off right here on the bandsaw. But we're going to take this, slide it down, position that there. Now, this bolt can slide over to here. Our fence comes in, and you can see we have a long slot in this fence. And the reason for that long slot is so now we can adjust this fence wherever we want. You can see the bolt sliding in the slot, up and back, just like that. Well, 90% of the time you're going to be working in this little area here with whatever diameter bearing you're having on your bit. But if that's where you want your fence, we'll lock it down and we're ready to machine our cuts. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is the zero clearance inserts on the inside of the fence. Okay, we've got our fence operating now. We're going to talk about the zero clearance situation. What you can do, you can move your in feed and your out feed as close as you can to the bit and operate that way. But what we like to do is move these in feed and out feed back and put what we call a zero clearance insert in, like this. Okay? And you have 3 of those that come with your router table, 3 zero clearance. To get those cut out, what you have to do is put one in, center your in feed and your out feed here, lock those down, pivot your fence in so you're close to the bit as possible. Then take a black magic marker, or I guess a white magic marker, and mark the profile of that bit with a pencil or whatever. Once you mark the profile of that bit, take that insert out, take it over to your bandsaw, and cut it out until you have a zero clearance situation like this. So now we can come into here, we'll take our screwdriver and lock down our 3 bolts on each side, and we'll be ready to operate. Okay, you can see how our fence is pivoting here now, and the way we do it, we take a simple straight edge, and we slide that straight edge on our bearing. Just pivot your fence flush with that bearing, lock your fence down up here, and you're ready to start cutting. And we use this pivot mode 90% of the time because 90% of router bits have a bearing. If we want to switch to a different router bit, all we have to do is unloosen the top nut, bring this fence back, the insert will slide out the bottom, insert the other one from the bottom like this, and you can see we have a different zero clearance insert for a different router bit. Drop it into our pin right here. We're ready to operate for the next bit. So it looks like we're all ready. Our table is in operating condition. We're going to put our dust hose on here, and we're going to start building this cabinet. Okay, the first thing we're going to do when we start building this cabinet is we're going to build the face frame first. It's just like building a house. If the foundation's laid square, the rest of the house is square. Well, if our face frame is square, everything that fits behind it is going to be square also. So it's very important to get this face frame built square, and the dimensions are provided for you. Now, when we put this together, what we're going to do is we're going to use the tongue and groove method of building a cabinet. You can see right here we have a series of grooves coming down our two stiles, our outside stiles here. We also have some grooves here, grooves at the top and grooves at the top here. And the corresponding sides that fit into those are going to have tongues, thus making the cabinet come together very precise and very strong. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how we're going to lay out this face frame. Okay, here's the face frame we're going to be building, and we've cut out all the parts that are on my table here, okay? And what you want to do is make sure you cut these all out the right length. All these parts are identical. Make sure you use a stop gauge to get them all cut exactly to the right length, the corresponding parts that are the same length. Okay, then what we're going to do is lay this out, and then we're going to take and position all these right where they're going to go. This one's going to, the bottom, these here, the upright ones are called stiles. Anything moving up and down vertically is a stile. Anything running horizontally is a rail. So we're going to take this rail and line it up with this stile and mark where it goes right there. Okay, this rail, we're going to bring this stile over to here. That's the distance apart. We know right where to put it, right here and right here. And we just keep working our way up all the way to the top until we get to here. We don't know where these go. Well, these are 4-inch openings for these drawers. So I cut a bunch of 4-inch blocks that we're going to put into here, and we're going to use those to position to make sure everything lines up perfect there. So we'll come here, put this rail, mark it, come here, put that rail, mark it, and we should end up perfectly matched right on the top, right there. Okay, you can see we have all those lines traced right there, where all those rails are going to go. Now, we want to take the other corresponding stile, line it up, and transfer these lines to this stile. So we're going to do that, line them up, take a couple of spring clamps and clamp them so they don't move. Then what you're going to do is take your square and start at the bottom right here. Let's put this one up here. Start at the bottom and start transferring those lines. And we'll do that all the way up on the other stile. Okay, you can see we have the lines all parallel with each other. Both sides are exactly the same. Now you want to do the same thing on these middle sections. And these are just lined up in the middle, so you just measure from the center. Make sure you're centered. You're going to mark that, of course. Then you're going to transfer that one to here, that one to here, and so forth. So those are lined up. Same thing here. We want all these to be parallel, so we're going to come into here and line these up like that. So once you got all your positioning, all your lines drawn right where they got to go, what I do then, I'll come back and number the joints just so I know everything's going to fit. I'll put a letter 1 and 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. I'll just keep going, number every joint, 4, 4, and so forth. Two things, it makes sure everything fits the way I want, plus it assures me that that side's the side that's a good side and it's face up. Okay, the way we're going to attach this is we're going to use the pocket hole joint. We don't use the pocket hole very seldom, but on the face frame we're going to. And you can see we have a pocket hole already drilled on this, but we're going to come in here and show you how we're going to drill the pocket hole to attach this face frame. Okay, we're going to show you how we drill the pocket holes with our pocket hole jig here. And what we're going to do, just a little demonstration, is drill some pocket holes in this piece here and attach it to that piece there. And using our jig, we just take our jig and screw it to a piece of plywood, okay? And what we're going to do is take and set our piece right into here. And to get this 1.5 inches centered, what you want to do is center it between this point right here and this point right here, the outside. And once we have that, what I always do is put a little mark on the floor of my jig. Now I know exactly where to set that thing every time. We'll take and clamp it, and we're ready to drill the 2 holes. Now, before we drill the 2 holes, we always want to make sure that the tip of that drill bit, after it goes through that bushing there, is approximately 1/8 of an inch off the floor. Doesn't have to be exact, approximately 1/8. So set your stop collar accordingly. Now, we're going to bring our railer style into here, clamp it, and just simply drill the 2 holes. Okay, and there's our 2 pocket holes. Now, to attach that to the corresponding joint, all we do is line the 2 pieces up where we want them, and of course we want them flush on that front side. So we use a little tool called a face clamp. And what that does, when I put these 2 pieces together and clamp it, it assures that that front side is perfectly flush. Okay, what we're going to do next, before we assemble that joint, is we're going to glue it. Now, a lot of people say gluing in grain does no good because all the glue in grain is like a bunch of straws, just sucks all the glue. Well, when I'm doing a big face frame like on our cabinet there, what I'll do is I'll come into a series of all my end grain and put a little bit of glue on that end grain. I'll put a little glue on the other end grain, okay? And we'll keep doing that on 3 or 4 pieces. Now we're ready to assemble it. We also put a little bit on the edge grain, just a little bit. Now I'm ready to assemble this joint. That first area glue is soaked in. I'll put another layer of glue on there. And with the glues they have nowadays, I tell you what, you put this joint together, we're going to take and clamp that right like this. Make sure we're lined up flush. Clamp it. We're ready to screw it together. Okay, so let's go get our screw gun and our screws, and we're going to show you how we screw that. Okay, we've got our screw gun and our screws now, and there's 2 types of screws. There's a fine threaded screw and a coarse threaded screw. The fine we're going to use with hardwoods. The coarse we're going to use with softwoods. And since we're using a hardwood here, we're going to stick a couple of fine threaded screws in here into the pockets, and then you just simply screw the joint together. Right like that. Once those are secured, you pop your face clamp off, and you have a nice flush joint that barely needs any sanding. So we're going to gather up all those pieces for our face frame, and we're going to start screwing them together. Okay, now before you start pocket screwing and assembling that face frame, what we have to do next, before we do that, is cut the grooves. Drill the pocket holes first, then we'll come in and cut the grooves. Now, where are you going to place the grooves? Well, we want to put 1 groove on the outside and 1 groove on the outside here for our 2 sides, of course. These 2 grooves here, we want to put them on the inside here for our drawer slides. They're going to be right inside here flush, okay? This groove on the top, you'll see later, is where our corner blocks are going to lock in that we attach your top to. This groove right here is on the top. That's where our floor goes right here. We have a groove down here that's going to be putting together strength down at the bottom of our cabinet. Now, to cut all of those grooves and the corresponding tongues, that's where our tongue and groove set comes into play. Okay? And here's our groove cutter, our tongue cutter. Okay, what's nice about all of the sets, all of the Sommerfeld sets is this. Once you have 1 bit set to the correct height, all the other bits in the set are automatically preset for you. And just to show you an example here. Once you cut that groove, you can see when I set this tongue cutter up, how that groove cutter automatically fits in there and they're perfectly aligned. So there's no need to adjust your router up and down when you're making a tongue and groove joint, or a raised panel set, or a glass panel. all the grass panel, raised panel, all the sets are all set that way. Now, you're not supposed to be able to do that. Take a router bit, stick it into the router, and bomb it out. Because when you go to tighten up that bit now, that bit should have the capability of sucking down into the collet to get tight. Well, that's why we include with our sets this little rubber grommet. It's just a little rubber grommet. We're going to drop that rubber grommet down inside the router. And what that does, you can see there's a little cushion there. When I tighten it, that bit will suck down against that rubber grommet the same every time, and we're in business. So we're going to tighten up this groove cutter here now into our router, and we're going to start cutting the grooves in our stiles for our face frame. Okay, we're ready to stick our bit into our router. Now, what's nice about this router, if you want to, we're not height adjusted yet, but when you take this router, remember what I said about this 3 1/4? You pull in on this handle, on the knob, and you can move that router bit, unlock it here first. You can move that bit up and down very quickly, so a router raiser really isn't needed. When you get it right where you want, you lock it in, and you can, right underneath here, you can fine tune that bit perfectly, just perfectly right where you want it. But the nice thing about this router, you take that router all the way to the top, automatically the spindle lock is tight. So you don't need 2 wrenches or anything. All you have to do is drop that bit into there, snug this up, no other wrench, no spindle lock, it automatically locks in. Now, once you move that down about an inch, then she free turns. Okay. Now, if you don't want to do that, you can reach underneath here and push in on your spindle lock between bits. We'll do that. We'll show you that later. Once your bit is installed tight, with our table we have a bunch of zero clearance rings. And those rings will set into here like this. They drop down, and if you want to tighten with the spanner wrench that comes with it, you can tighten the ring, and that's locked in. Now, what we have to do next is set the height of that bit. To set the height of that bit, when we cut our tongue, we want about 1/8 of an inch shoulder on one side of that tongue. Well, forget all that. We got this little tool called the Easy Set. It automatically sets 8 different router bits very easily. And it does it for every thickness of wood that we have. Okay, the thickness of this wood is 13/16. So we're going to take this jig and we're going to dial it in to 13/16. We always start at the star. Go to the left, start at the star, go to 13/16. We're ready to go. Now, what are we using? The groove cutter. We find the groove cutter, which is right here. We just set this down on our table, and all we have to do is lower that bit. I'm just going to raise it in until that fits into that groove. Right there. Once we got that set, we can lock our router in position, and we're ready to go. Now, when we change from one bit to the next bit, we don't have to mess with the height because our bits are the same. So we've got the bit set to the right height. Now we got to set the fence to the correct position. To do that, our pivot pin automatically will come over to here and drop into our slot, into our pivot pin hole. Remember our pin fence slides? Take any old straight edge, put that on the bearing. Pivot your fence till you're flush with the bearing, lock down, and you're ready to cut. Okay? Now you can see that our fence is not parallel with any of these slots. That's why we never use a miter gauge. We don't care because 90% of the time, if you have a bearing, you're working off the bearing. Okay, we got this member right here. And what we're going to do is cut a groove behind it for our side. When we cut that groove now, we don't want to cut that groove all the way through. Here's a piece where we cut all the way through, see? And we got into the pocket hole and stuff. We don't want to do that. So what you want to do, that's why we drill the pocket holes first. Start the groove out in here and end it right in here. We don't have to go the whole way. So what I'll do is I'll come into here, right like this. I'll edge that fence back into the bit. I'll come into here and I'll stop a little bit shy. Okay? So we're going to come into here, right like about right there. And we'll stop there. Now, you can put little marks on your zero clearance block there to get them so they fit out just perfect like this. Now, once you cut, we're going to cut all the grooves, and then we're going to cut the tongues. Now, right now, I'm going to cut a tongue. We're going to switch bits. I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is to switch bits.